once outside the comfort zone, I work towards getting students to appreciate and engage in sympoietic learning. So sympoietic learning, which is this making with, learning that happens when we make together knowledge, and so we build knowledge together. I always tell my students, when you come into the classroom, you don't come in as a tabula rasa. You come in with something that, from your experiences, your background, your learning in other classes, all counts, and so bring it in. And we will make perhaps new knowledge, perhaps new forms of knowledge, perhaps new manifestations of knowledge together in the classroom. So we are learning together as we make. And so then also, and this is kind of strange sometimes to students, because they used to banking, to people just telling them what they need to do, and how do I fulfill the requirements, and how do I make you happy, basically, as a professor. And I don't think that's the approach that really helps students learn. You can very much become very dogmatic about things. You can become very arrogant, and all sorts of other things that just, disregarding everything students have learned, and just pouring out all the things that you think are important. And yet that in itself is very exhausting, I think. I mean, it may make you feel good as a professor that you are, oh, this is how much I taught my students, and this is how much they know because of me, which really goes against the whole principle of Ubuntu, personhood being contingent on others, on personhood of those around us. And so that style of just being the top-down pourer of knowledge doesn't work in this. And so sympoietic types of learning become important, critical. It's communal. Let's do this all together. And so students, it takes them a while to appreciate that, because most of the education is probably not done that way. So anyway, so the next point then is also this self-initiated interdisciplinary connections sense that I want the students to get, that they understand that yes, the things they bring in are going to be a part of building together, making together, and so because of that, you have to take this initiative to make the connections with other disciplines from which you have learned. So you are a mechanical engineer, and you, or engineering student who comes into a classroom that deals with perhaps leadership, you cannot assume that because, oh, this is hard sciences, this is not, so I can't really connect those. No, you need to be able to look at whatever it is you learn in there and bring into the classroom and kind of share that, and then we can help. If you need, by initiating, this initiation really sometimes takes the form of only sharing the information you have to share. You may not be able to actually establish the connections at times. And so as a community that's learning together, we might be able to see some connections that you didn't see before, and vice versa. So this becomes important, that you initiate, you pour out or put on the table that which you're learning, so that we can all make sense of it together. And so this, in a sense, will contribute to the collective, and which is the part of the goal of our learning process. So, and the other aspect is the value of group dynamics and collaboration over individual and self-centered learning. A lot of students come from a tradition where they're competing, and so they want to know how distinct they are from the crowd. And we don't necessarily encourage, in the classrooms that I teach, we don't encourage this exclusivistic sense of being, that as an individual, you have to be number one, you have to surpass somebody else. Because when you think about it, what does that do to everyone else? When you say that one student is actually surpassing everybody else in their intelligence, it is a violation of human dignity, basically, because you're not taking, you assuming that you have the highest measure of intelligence in your hands, that you can actually determine who the intelligent people are and who are not intelligent. And so students come with that assumption that in this classroom there is a sort of measure in which some people are going to be distinct, and I want to be that one distinct person. And so challenging that is very untraditional, and sometimes is faced with opposition. But it's part of that journey we talk about in Ithaca, that as you go along, we continue to shape the classroom dynamics really in terms of valuing those dynamics themselves and valuing collaboration. And so you slowly abandon that individualistic sense of existence, this self-centered learning, into this space in which we actually sympoietic learners, and we are in a community of learners, and we're learning together and building knowledge together. So also there's a continuous engagement in my classrooms by virtue of valuing education also for its own sake, rather than only for the sake of grades and or employability. That too goes against the culture, where students want to know what is this, what's the use of this class. So utility, argument of utility is very, very strong. Students and institutions in general, want to know, what do I do after I finish this class? How am I going to use this class? And so on and so on. So grades matter, employability matter, and so we try to challenge that learning just for grades and for employability really isn't learning. I mean, it's not long-lasting learning. Life learning takes a different curve. You need to value education for its own sake. And that's pretty much what's going to make a difference, because you will never stop learning, even if what you're learning does not seem to give you the results you expect. Remember the journey to Ithaca. You learn for the sake of learning. You're journeying because the journey will offer you multiple possibilities that you never imagined. But if you only focus on the grades and employability, you will be very limited in your learning. And so this is what I try to encourage my students. They need to look at it from a much broader perspective of what education really means. And so we challenge the concept of education too in most of my classes. We often hear of universities have all this motto of how classrooms have to be student-centered and so on, which, because of this dualism that we live in, these binaries that we always live in, if it's not student-centered, then it's probably centered on something else. And sometimes it's teacher-centered. So what I try to do is to foster a classroom environment that is neither student-centered nor teacher-centered. And you can add curricula-centered and all these other kinds of centeredness, but it's not student-centered, it's not teacher-centered, but one in which human dignity, equitable human conviviality, and communal learning take the center stage. Because we journey through uBuntu, we learn about what it is to be human. And it's not in the sense of the Cartesian dualism type perceptions. It is not through all these humanistic perceptions of human, but this uBuntu journey really takes you into a perception of dignity that is very different, and it centers around defining personhood through persons. And so looking at this in terms of human dignity, equitable human conviviality, because we can have human conviviality that is inequitable. And so professors and students, we are in a space in which we engage by respecting that human dignity of all those around us in our community, but also having these interactions that are equitable as human beings. So I am not superior to my students are not superior to me. Nothing is centered on any of us. We destroy the centers, we undo all those barriers and interact as human beings in that particular context. And also, learning then becomes really this communal learning becomes the center stage. We learn together, we're building things together, and we're initiating together. We are helping one another in making the connections, and we are collaborating with one another. And so it becomes really a communal learning kind of atmosphere. Thank you.
Xinguavilano, Xinguavilano.